it's the most disempowering mentality in a culture to assume that the only solution to a problem is a government solution.
Right.
There are lots and lots and lots of solutions otherwise. And so, you know, from my perspective, if the people in the industry want to play this game, that's fine. But those of us who want to, you know, play a different game, you know, if we don't want to play in an NFL stadium and we want to play a Sunday afternoon pickup football two-hand touch game in the backyard and have, you know, the lilac bush and the maple tree as our goals, we should be able to play that game. Nearly
100,000 farms were in the path of Hurricane Helene, according to the American Farm Bureau. Almost $15 billion of agricultural value are generated by crops and livestock in those affected counties. Now, farmers and ranchers are struggling just to get feed and supplies and clear out their flooded fields. What will the road to recovery look like? How will our food security and supply chains be affected by the damage? Here to help us work through some of those questions and so much more is America's favorite farmer, Joel Salatin. Joel, we're so happy to welcome you back on Collapse Life.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you.
How are things at Polyface Farms? Did you have any impacts from the storm?
The main thing we got was rain. It was a little bit breezy, but mainly rain. We're fortunately far enough inland and kind of up in the mountains here that that normally we get rain, but we've certainly had devastation in the past. Hurricane Fran back about 25 years ago was absolutely devastating. And of course, in our area, Hurricane Camille back in 1967. I remember that. I was a kid, but you know, 150 people died in kind of an adjoining county to us. They were just on the other side of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and they got the brunt of it. We got what we call the skirts of it. They got the brunt of it. And so we've certainly had, but we've not had anything as devastating as what just hit these guys. I think to put it in perspective, Fran, which was the one that that took out our bridge and different things here, it was the only time we've ever seen water get in the public road at our farm, the road into us. We've been marooned many times, but you know, they're just floods. Okay, so you can't go anywhere for 3 or 4 hours, and then it goes down, and you know, you're okay. You lose some fences, you know, you got some debris in the fields, you know, but it's not devastating. Fran was, and that the ground was saturated for a week, and then overnight we got 12 inches. And so that was the most devastating one I can remember here in my lifetime. But down in North Carolina, they essentially had saturated fields and then got 20 inches in a day. Wow. So I can hardly fathom. That would have been 8 more inches than we got in the worst one that I can remember. And so I just can hardly fathom what that would have been like. It's really, really devastating. Our river actually, you know, we got whatever it was, 11 inches in 9 days or something. So the fields were so wet, you literally, it was like walking in, you know, on a sponge. And then it got warm, you know, and boy, grass grew like a banshee. So for us, it's been just an incredible, you know, blessing. I mean, last year this time we couldn't get a drop of moisture for love nor money, it seemed like. And this year we've got green pastures, grass up the wazoo, and it's just been you know, really good. And for us, we'd had two month-long significant droughts this year, one in the spring and one in the fall. And we had actually pumped all our ponds dry with irrigation. And so it was fun to go up into these ponds that we'd pumped dry and watch them over that 10 days gradually fill. And by the last day, the last one was just filling up. And that was just such a pleasure to catch all that surface runoff and know that it wasn't being added to the floodwaters.
Yeah, great. I'm so pleased to hear that it wasn't so devastating for you. But what have you been hearing through the Farmers Network about those who were in the storm's path? And let's talk about what those impacts will look like for the rest of us, for those of us who are not farmers, but who are eaters.
Yeah, of course. I don't. It certainly is a significant path. The fact is that the food system. This was a localized thing. I mean, it was big, but it's not big like a whole country or a whole thing. It's a little bit like the drought that was in the southern tier of the U.S. for 2 to 3 years back, 4 and 5 years ago. From South Georgia through Louisiana, Alabama, Oklahoma into Texas, and resulted in the elimination of many cattle. And right now, if you're watching the news, you know that cattle prices are at historic highs because the national cow herd is lower than it's been since 1950 due to that drought. And I remember being in Mississippi 3 years ago in the fall, talking to farmers there that were having cows breaking their legs because the ground had cracked open so far. The cows were stepping in the cracks and breaking their legs, and you just had to go out and shoot them because there's no cure for that. And we're seeing the impacts of that now. Mm-hmm. I think that this actually won't have a big effect on prices very much. I mean, this is a mountainous region. It's not corn country. It's not soybean. It's a lot of mountains. It's the Great Smoky Mountains. So there's a tremendous amount of forest and trees, and so this is not what we would call the food basket of our country. Right. And so I think from a retail, actual food inventory supply standpoint, I don't think we're going to see a radical change in prices or shortages or anything like that. But for those individual farmers in that region, many of whom are very small farms, it is devastating. The things I'm hearing are, they still haven't found all the bodies yet, mm-hmm. and they probably never will. There's some that are just all silted up, and of course, people that have lost homes and all of that. But these are resilient people, and they're banding together as communities, helping each other. And there's a lot of resources in that area. Again, it's a lot of forest, so there's a lot of wood, and mm-hmm. there's a lot of wood. There's a lot of sawmills, and so I can imagine that once they clear the debris, the biggest I think issues from what I've been able to see are just the logistics of transportation, of getting around.
Yeah.
These big avalanches came off the mountains, just sloughed the mountainside off, the road, the mountain, everything. Yeah. And so that's going to be a major, major rebuilding project to try to either reroute those roads or try to fill in the chasms. I mean, hay bales were washed away, livestock was washed away. Yeah. And so people that were able to get animals, this is where being able to have animals on pasture where, the animals know, and they head to high ground. I haven't seen any statistics on how many animals were lost, but for sure, people who had factory confinement pig houses and chicken houses down in the flooding areas, they were certainly lost everything.
Yeah. People
who had animals on pasture, especially big animals like cattle and sheep, most of those were able to get to high ground. Yeah. Now the problem is a lot of them make hay on bottomland. That's where the best ground is, to make hay on. So they have their bales of hay stacked near the creek, near the river, and now all the winter feed. So there are several large philanthropic efforts now trailering hay into the region to try to get them through through this winter.
Yeah, this is by no means over. I think the next couple of months are going to be very difficult for people. What are your thoughts on the kind of federal disaster relief programs, crop insurance, other financial aids to come to the aid of those farms that were affected?
Well, no offense, everybody, but I'm not sure that the federal government should be in the disaster relief program, as well as most of the other programs it's in, education. Should we even have a USDA? I mean, I'm going off the reservation here, but the work of Samaritan's Purse and the philanthropic work that's been done down there has run circles around the federal agencies, because they're just bureaucratic, and they've got boxes to check, and whatever, compliance things to do. And I mean, for example, I just talked to a guy that actually owns a little bubble helicopter, a little 2-seater, and he had it out, kind of the couple days later, looking over things, and he saw this couple standing on a house, waving. So he landed, and they were desperate to get out. And so he left his son there, took the lady out, and because he only had a 2-seater, so you only take one person. He took her out to a staging area where there were, sheriffs and emergency personnel and stuff at a staging area. And the government agents said they would arrest him if he took off again. And he said, "Arrest me." And he took off and went back and got the man. And then he went back and got his son and brought him back out. And so what you have are, you have bureaucrats, in many ways, standing in the way of just common sense, Samaritan work.
Yeah.
And so, if we all had the tax money that we've paid for government capricious spending on unseemly projects, if we all had our tax money for that, we'd all have way more money to come together and offer in times of need like this.
Yeah, for sure. It's been remarkable to see how the local community, but also people across the country and even up in Canada, have been responding to this. Like the outpouring of support, and the people just showing up with whatever equipment they have. The ranchers in Texas sending hay up, as you mentioned. Like, it's been really heartwarming, I think, at a moment when our nation really needed to see that we actually can come together, and we can help each other in hard times. I think it's been really a nice thing to see.
Oh, it has been, and the farmers in Texas, to their credit, they went through 2 or 3 years of extreme drought, liquidated their herds. And so they actually have a lot of extra hay right now, because they've had all this. They've got 20 inches of above normal rainfall the last 2 years. So they're just swimming in grass with no cows to eat it. Yeah. And so the stockpile of hay is huge in these formerly drought-stricken areas that are still building back their cattle herds. And so things do get provided around, and yeah, I think I talked to one gal that they had taken a trailer load of hay down from Michigan, and they parked the trailer at our house because she was going some other places, and she didn't want to tow the trailer with her where the other places she was going. And so she parked it at our house. And one of the problems is that because the roads are so bad, every road into that area becomes a bottleneck. And so these staging areas are just, are congested, and you can't actually get in there. So she found a farmer friend, that I know, who was willing to let his place be staged. He lost his turkeys, his chickens, his hay, a little bit of his barn, a concrete slab, and he had become a staging area. He lives just 10 minutes outside of Asheville, and so she came back. She said he's just walking around like he's in shock. I mean, you have this initial completely it's beyond depressed. It's like it's shock. The intimidation, the emotional intimidation of the catastrophe is so large, you're paralyzed by everything that has to be done.
Yeah.
And so so that's kind of the initial, I think that will be with these folks for, maybe a month, 6 weeks. And then, people come in with chainsaws and you start seeing, well, this road's now open. And there's they had 1,100 power company trucks down there, or maybe 11,000. I think maybe it was 11,000. So there's been and then power gets back on. In fact, I told this one farmer friend who lost all of his turkeys, I said, well, when you get power and you're ready, tell me, and we'll send you your turkeys for Christmas and Thanksgiving. And we felt like that was something we could do, because we had a personal friend that was devastated. And so there's collection agencies, there are groups, there's all sorts of things that's going in there. And my understanding is that the private efforts are so far eclipsing the government efforts.
Yeah. Just turning gears a little bit, you're famous for talking about regenerative agriculture and, a different way of farming. Is there a role in the face of natural disasters like this for building resilience through these other alternative forms of agriculture? Is regenerative agriculture helpful in the face of something as devastating as Hurricane Helene?
Well, yes. What can a person do? So a couple things I'll just suggest, and I don't want anybody there to be offended at I'm just throwing kind of a checklist of things that can be done. One is obviously to increase the organic matter in your fields. Every 1% organic matter holds an additional 20,000 gallons of water per acre. So here on our farm, for example, in 50 years, we've gone from 1% to a little over 8% organic matter, which means we can now hold 140,000 gallons of water per acre that we couldn't hold, 50 years ago. Now you say, well, that's nice, but this overrode that. Yes, it did. But every drop of water you can hold, and this goes for droughts as well. Obviously, if we can hold more water, then we can suffer more deluges, if you will, without damage. And we can also handle more droughts longer, into the thing. So to me, the first step of resilience is increasing organic matter in soil. Mm-hmm. And of course, the two things that destroy organic matter, number one is tillage. Number two is monocropping. So tillage and monocropping are the two biggest, destroyers of organic matter in the soil. How do you build it? Well, you build it with perennials. You build it with compost, organic matter, and building it up that way. That's one. Number two is to build ponds. And so, I'm reminded that in the 1950s, what was at that time the Soil Conservation Service, it has now morphed into the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. Back in the 50s, they would cost share ponds for farmers. They encouraged ponds, realizing that hydration was an important part of landscape management. And now ponds are seen as a liability. And they want to map them so they can fill them in, because now, wild ducks land on them and bring high path avian influenza, supposedly, allegedly. And so on our farm, we continue to build ponds. And it was just so exciting to see even after we had 11 inches of rain over just the few days at the hurricane, 11 inches. And it took that much rain at that time to actually fill our ponds. So we have a middle river, which is, when it's low, you can, if you're real athletic, you could probably jump across it. It's normally about anywhere from 10 to 12, 13 feet wide. And it runs kind of under our lane through the front of our farm there. And that creek, it was exciting to know that our 950 acres here had not contributed to that stream flow, because our ponds kept filling up and filling up and filling up during all that surface rain runoff. And so, 500 years ago, North America was 8% water, a lot of it due to beaver dams. We had 200 million beavers building ponds all over the face and how these water. And today we're less than 4% water. So I just want to think big picture. And again, I am not suggesting that this would eliminate flooding in a situation like this. I'm not suggesting that, but I am suggesting that every drop that we're able to store, save, control is one drop that isn't as devastating. So for example, if of those 20 inches of rainfall, if 11 of them had been able to been captured in ponds, then you would have only had that extra 9 inches that would have created the flooding. Well, that would have been a big difference between 9 inches and 20 inches in that short period of time. And so the devastation, certainly there would have been some flooding damage, but it would have been minimized.
Yeah.
Because so much of the early floodwaters would have gone into ponds rather than simply continuing to add and add and add to the crest flow to the crest flow of these creeks and rivers.
Yeah, and it just becomes exponential at that point. So yeah, anything you can move off and actually store for future use seems like a no-brainer. Right.
Yeah. It's like a water savings account. And so, if we would invest as a culture, if we would, we don't have the beavers anymore. We have a few, but not very many. And the problem is the beavers often, for modern purposes, they don't always build upon where you want it. And they often build in the wrong place. So I'm not ready to say, let's abandon all the land and let it turn wild and go back to beavers. But we do now have excavation equipment where we can very strategically place permaculture style ponds on high ground, even doing better than the beavers, if you will, by getting higher on the terrain. Beavers only built stuff where there was running water. Well, we can go where water doesn't run. Most of our ponds on our farm, we've built, 20 ponds, and very few of them, in fact, I'm trying. Yeah. Well, a couple of them are where there's are in, what we call, seasonal streams, something that you can jump across, 9 months of the year, and 3 months of the year they're dry or virtually dry. So I think those are called ephemeral streams.
Nice.
And so, so all of our ponds basically are not on streams or anything. They're in valleys where, you only get runoff in a snow melt, a flood, a hurricane. And so they catch that water and act as a savings account or a bowl to let that, flood water go into, so that it doesn't go on into the river and become added to all the other rest of the water going downhill. If farmers actually, invested in that, put attention on it. I'm not saying that in a Helene kind of flood that there wouldn't be a flood. I think there's still floods, but the impact could be. Even if we could have stopped 50% of it, 50% of it would have been major. A lot of people would still have their houses. Most of the roads would still be in. There'd be a huge change from that.
You mentioned that there's an effort to actually map ponds and control where they're placed. So that kind of leads me to think that it leads me to some of the conversations that are going to be coming up at your upcoming Rogue Food Conference, which is when rules are ridiculous or they don't make any sense. You don't necessarily need to pay much attention to them. So talk a little bit about the conference, the kinds of people that will be coming, the kinds of conversations that you're planning to have there.
Sure. So the upcoming Rogue Food Conference will be November 9, actually, in Dallas, Texas, at the Met Church. And there's a Friday night VIP dinner at Crunchy Mama Farms. You can find a lot more by going to roguefoodconference.org. And the Rogue Food Conference was established by John Moody and I back in 2020, after we had a conversation. Both of us had spoken at a conference, and I was feeling, I was meeting people who had outsmarted the bureaucracy. They figured out a way to sell stuff. When we talk about food choice, and I know choice, the word choice is a lightning rod word right now in our culture. And so a lot of people don't realize how little food choice we have. You walk into Walmart or Costco and you see shelves full of stuff. You say, what do you mean there's no choice? Well, that is all very carefully licensed and monitored by the food police. And so, if you wanted to get, Aunt Matilda's chicken pot pie, for example, it would be illegal for her to sell it to you unless she is licensed and in compliance with food regulations, even though you are exercising freedom of choice to determine the fuel for your own personal microbiome. And so this attack, I'll call it an attack on our food system, has been ongoing essentially since Teddy Roosevelt developed the Food Safety Inspection Service, but it has really, really increased, since President Obama gave us the Food Safety Modernization Act and the 1967 Safe Food Act. These in later years here have given way more bureaucracy and way more regulatory oversight over what's available, so that two neighbors, I mean, you can't buy raw milk, you can't get homemade bologna, summer sausage. I mean, there are myriad food items that could be handled in neighbor to neighbor transactions that are illegal to sell because the infrastructure or the hazardous analysis critical control point plans aren't in compliance with some bureaucratic rule book. And so what I started running into, and of course, if I wrote a book, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, about our battles with the food police over the years. Some things we have fought and won. Other battles we have determined it's not a hill worth dying on. So we haven't fought those. And so I was running into people who were very sharp and were figuring out ways to circumvent the phrase for sale. In other words, it's the commerce clause. When food enters commerce, that's when the government says we're in control. When it enters commerce, which is any normal sale transactional deal. But if you can figure out how to convey food in a transaction that doesn't fit the definition of commerce, then the government has no control. For example, you can give away raw milk, you can give away homemade charcuterie, I can give away chicken pot pies made in my kitchen, but I just can't sell them. And of course, that begs the question, well, what is it about taking money that suddenly turns it from a patriotic, benign, wonderful thing to a hazardous substance? Right. And so I was running into people who were figuring out, end runs around the system. I said, man, these folks need a stage. I need to have a platform so they can tell their story and encourage all the rest of us to push the system and to figure out loopholes and ways to get around it. And so in 2019, the fall, John Moody said, hey, see, I'm the idea guy. I'm not the one that works behind the curtain. And so John Moody said, hey, I'll work the curtain if you'll be the voice. And so, sure. So we teamed up, had the first one in Cincinnati in 2020, in the spring of 2020, literally, like a week before the lockdowns. And it was just like drinking Liberty water out of a fire hose. I mean, it was the most unbelievable thing in the world. And so now we have 2 a year, every year. And the next one's going to be in Dallas, Texas, the Rogue Food Conference. And what we're doing is giving a voice, giving a platform to people who have figured out how to transact food choice without entering commerce. So we have food churches, we have private membership associations, we have constitutional amendment, right of search and seizure, right of people to interact, to contract law. Uh-huh. One of the neat ones that actually came kind of spontaneously at one of these conferences was the idea of selling a class. Like, I'll tell you what, for $400, you can sign up for a 30-minute butchery class, and the course materials are 50 pounds of beef. And so you're paying for instruction, but the meat the food is actually part of the course materials and not actually sold as a standalone commodity.
Love it.
So there's a tremendous amount of creativity, innovation going on, and since we've been doing this now, this will be our 4th year. Actually, if we count 2020, it's our 5th year of actually doing them. And we've had people now sometimes, hybridize a little piece of this, a little piece of that, and they create their own things. And it's really, really wonderful to see how people, obviously, there's some now that are doing pet food. That's going to be the next kind of, I think, battleground in the food freedom fight, is states are starting to crack down on the pet food thing. So, we'll see where that goes. Yeah. But there's a tremendous amount of creativity, and we're excited to be able to give it voice.
That's fantastic. Is the conference mainly for farmers and producers, or is it geared towards the consumer end also?
It's geared toward the consumer also. Look, the farmers historically have not been the ones to upset the apple cart. Farmers are a pretty conservative lot, and so they tend to not be the most rebellious people in the world. But they will move if they feel like they have support. Mm-hmm. And so the place where the consumer comes along here is, if a consumer goes to a farmer and says, "Hey, I'll do this for you, or I'll stand with you in this, and I will write letters to the politician. I will partner with you in this." Then farmers are much more likely to step through, what could be a gray area, right, and push themselves a little bit. So no, it's very much for both kinds of people, because again, the consumer, the non-farmer, of course, I'm a consumer too. I don't grow everything that I eat. So, I buy other things as well. All of us who buy things, we don't want to be limited as to what we can purchase. And so we have a stake in this just as much as the farmer, who has a stake in the ability to sell.
One of the issues that you're going to bring to the table at the upcoming conference is RFID tags in livestock. So can you explain some of the concerns around that? What does it mean for farmers and their autonomy, but what does it mean as well for those of us as consumers?
I think the thing to understand, first of all, kind of a big picture thing, is that in the regulatory language now, years and years ago, it was always your cow, your chicken, the farmer's cow, the farmer's chicken. Now the language is all about your cow is part of the national herd. Your chicken is part of the national flock. And so this phrase, national herd, national flock, is now permeating the regulatory language, and it's been subtle. It's been, you know, it's moved over time, but this is language that didn't exist 50 years ago. Nobody in the government would have said that your cow is part of a national herd, but they do now with impunity. And so we have to realize that the mindset or the worldview now of the agriculture regulatory climate is very much a collectivist, a socialistic, communistic, collectivist type of mentality, that you don't actually own your chickens. That's why, you know, if I have a bunch of chickens and one of them tests positive for, you know, high path avian influenza, the government can come in without a warrant and take all my chickens and kill them. Even though I would say, wait a minute. I've got one chicken that has it. I have 1,000 that don't. Why kill the 1,000 that don't? Let's, you know, we'll get rid of the one that has it, and the ones that were immune, we'll breed those, and we'll breed, you know, stronger immunity in. I mean, because even these huge high path avian influenza outbreaks where, you know, there's 15,000 birds in a house, all of them, there are always a few hundred that never test positive, that never get sick and never test positive. Mm-hmm. Now, you would think that if somebody was really trying to select hardy, you know, seed stock, breeding stock, that every time that happens, they would take those 300 that never got it, even though, you know, 14,000 did, take those 300 and breed those. And very shortly, you would actually breed immunity into, you know, whatever it is that they have, let's have more of it, you know. Yeah. But instead, they annihilate everything. And the excuses that the government makes for this kind of thing are just, they're just as lame as can be, because they defy all rules of selecting the best and culling the worst. I mean, if you have plants or animals, you always select the best and cull the worst. I don't care if it's tomatoes or you know, oak trees or cows. Mm-hmm. You select the best, you cull the worst, and that's just part of good management. And so this across the board annihilation is crazy. So the RFID, you know, they tried to do this, whatever, 10, 12 years ago, and make it mandatory for everything. And we small farmers, we pushed back. One of the biggest problems with it is it's extremely scale prejudicial. So for example, if I have a whole herd of cows, for example, I've got a feedlot. All right. I only need one radio frequency identification tag. I only need one number for that whole herd of cows. Oh. Or steers or heifers, or you know, slaughter animals. But a farmer like us has to have one for every animal. Plus, we have to have the readers, the computer readers, to be able to read them all. This is expensive. Mm. And so what happens is the compliance is much, much cheaper for large outfits than for small outfits. And I will suggest that as a matter of philosophy, of political philosophy, any rule that's easier to comply with if you're large is an inherently unfair rule. Yeah. Let me give you an example of one that I consider that's fair. You know, people say, well, you know, they're all like, well, most of them are like that. So let me give you an example of one that I think is very fair. Speed limit laws. It doesn't take any more effort or cost to hold a tractor trailer to 60 miles an hour than it does a Toyota Prius. It's the same effort, the same thing. It's not prejudicial to one or the other. Mm-hmm. And so that's a fair regulation. But virtually all of these kinds of food farm regulations are prejudicial to smaller operations. Now, because of the massive pushback back, you know, 10, 15 years ago on the RFID, mandatory RFID, and it was going to be for chickens, turkeys, sheep, hogs, pigs, cows, everything. Okay. Massive pushback, and they shelved it. So now they're coming back a little more subtly, and they're saying, okay, we're only going to demand it for animals that are being shipped across state lines. So it's the old proverbial nose under the tent kind of thing. We'll just start it with animals being shipped over state lines, and everything else will be. But you know, this is a slippery slope, and all of us realize that that it doesn't actually solve anything, doesn't actually help anything. Goodness, one McDonald's hamburger, you ready for this? One McDonald's hamburger has pieces of 600 animals in it. 600 animals. Does anybody think that there will be a system in which you will be able to know which 600 animals were in burger A that sickened patron C? Right. It ain't going to happen. It's never going to happen. And so this is another example of a government program that is trying to offer the people who are the undiscerning hoi polloi, you know, the plebes. We are watching out for you. We are protecting you. We are, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it actually doesn't do anything except to continue centralizing and concentrating, you know, the animal industry.
Right. Is the idea that the tags will then send information back to some sort of centralized database in Washington, D.C. that one person will be sitting and watching? Is that kind of how they're selling it?
No, I think, well, yes. That is a covert idea, not overt.
Okay.
And the main idea is that there will be a database that tracks movement. So when steer A at farm X moves to farm Y across the state line, that we'll know that steer, you know, came from this farm to that farm. It's a, you know, the idea is to be able to trace. The word is traceability. You know, it sounds nice. It sounds like, you know, this is a more transparent system. But it's a case where the cure is worse than the disease.
Yeah.
It won't offer. I remember when Canada did mandatory RFID requirements in cattle. I was up there actually speaking at conferences a couple of years after mandatory ID went in up there. And I talked to folks that, you know, that ran slaughterhouses, and, you know, animals lose these tags. They don't stay in the ears. They lose them. So when they came in and one would come in without a tag, they had a box of them there, and they would just stick it in and scan it. And that way they could check the box. You know, we scanned the animal, but nobody actually knew exactly where the animal came from or its life history. And it was just the whole thing was fraudulent, but it made the, you know, the common person, the duplicitous common person, think that somebody was watching out for their welfare. Right. And that's what this is all about. It's all about, you know, doing foolishness and making people think it's efficacious.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like the COVID track and trace programs that they were trying to put in place as well, which, you know, maybe to some people sounded like a good thing, but it also sounds like a huge burden and a huge invasion of privacy. So, you know, the unintended consequences, or perhaps they were intended, also need to be considered.
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly right. There is a lot of similarity. Just be aware that every time we ask for a government solution, it means a reduction in freedom. That's just the way it is. And it's the most disempowering mentality in a culture to assume that the only solution to a problem is a government solution.
Right.
There are lots and lots and lots of solutions otherwise. And so, you know, from my perspective, if if the people in the industry want to play this game, that's fine. But those of us who want to, play a different game, if we don't want to play in an NFL stadium and we want to play a Sunday afternoon pickup football two-hand touch game in the backyard and have the lilac bush and the maple tree as our goals, we should be able to play that game. Mm-hmm. And this forcing everyone to play the exact same game on the same field, regardless of modality, protocol, market, distribution, any of those things, is simply a tyrannical one-size-fits-all noose.
Well, the Rogue Food Conference sounds incredible. I am going to make every effort to be there, and I can't wait. And it sounds like it's for people who are not just interested in food freedom, but just in freedom in general and liberty specifically. So I hope that people will go to the website and learn more, and tickets are available now. Is that right, Joel?
Yes, tickets are available now. It's coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Next couple of weeks. It won't be long, but we'd love to pack that out. It would be great. And trust me, you will seldom find a more thoughtful, creative group of people. I mean, true patriots. I mean, these, we would have been at the Boston Tea Party. These are the real people, and for everybody that's whatever, I don't want to get all political, but if you're frustrated by the philosophical compromise on, especially in the conservative realm, here's a place where you'll drink out of that true unadulterated liberty fire hose for a day, and it's enough to empower you for a good while, and you'll meet the greatest people. I mean, we're a real community of people that don't just say, we actually do, and you'll find tremendous camaraderie. And shoot, what can be more fun than outsmarting a bureaucrat? I mean, that's one of the funnest things in the world, isn't it?
Absolutely. Sign me up. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it, and looking forward to seeing you there. Any last words before we let you go back to your busy work of harvesting?
Yeah, so I was butchering Thanksgiving turkeys before I came in for the podcast. It's that time of year, so we're doing a lot of turkeys right now. It's fun to watch our work show up without to get it into bags without feathers. I would just tell people, I would just encourage people, closing idea, don't ever underestimate the power of your participatory decisions. So many times we get literally intimidated by the dysfunction of our day. I mean, if you want to tick off the things to be frustrated about, even angry about, you can make a big list, and then you can get depressed and frustrated and but the truth is that that where we are as a culture, where we are, is the result of trillions and trillions of little individual decisions people have been making for a long time. And where we will be in 30 years, the world that your grandchildren will inherit, will also be the result of trillions and trillions of individual decisions that we make. Do we buy this or this? Do we go here or there? Do we join this or that? Those are the decisions. And I would just encourage everybody to realize that that every decision you make is part of that pool that will manifest its own its own outcome somewhere down the road. And that's what drives cultural evolution and adaptation and movement, and always has and always will. And so stand up straight, step up, and realize that your decisions today do have an effect. And so make them intentionally, make them righteously, and let's, whatever our sphere of influence is, walk confidently forward with a sacred calling at our back.
Very wise words, Joel, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
And you. God bless. We're so grateful to have guests like Joel who offer us practical solutions and tools and great advice like that. And we also give thanks for viewers like you. If you are not subscribed to this channel yet, please help us do more by hitting the subscribe button and sharing this video with people you know who might be interested. Collapse Life is a thinking person's guide to civilization and demise. We're so happy to have you with us. We hope that you will also follow us on Substack at collapselife.substack.com and join us on Twitter, X, at collapse_life. Check out all the great designs that we have in the Collapse Life store. And then head back here next week for another episode of this podcast. We look forward to seeing you. And until then, just keep your chin up. It's only collapse. See you soon.